So before we do jump into today's video, I thought I'd give a quick mention to the Fantasy Football League that we are running this year for Fantasy Premier League. I'll leave a link in the description down below to the website, and as you can see on screen now, that's the team that I'm rocking this year, and you'll also find the league code on screen so you can go ahead and join the Ben HD YouTube League. We've done it for the past few years, we've already got a bunch of people in there, and it'll just be interesting to see who can come out on top by the end of the season. Also, let me know what you're making of my team at the moment. Probably going to make some changes between now and the start of the season. Callum Robinson at Sheffield United, I'm expecting big things from, but make sure you do go ahead and join the league, all for a bit of good fun. But we are here today to discuss my Premier League predictions for the upcoming season. With the Premier League back this weekend, I thought now would be a good time. We've got the transfer window shutting tomorrow, so not many things should change between now and then. I'm interested to know from you guys what you think will happen in this year's Premier League. I'll leave a few polls for you to vote on. Obviously, don't take this video too seriously. I'm probably going to be horrifically wrong, and we'll look back on it at the end of the season. I'll also look at some of the comments from this video as well, and just laugh at how wrong we all were. But without any further ado, let's hop into them. So starting out at the bottom and then working our way upwards, I have thrown Sheffield United into 20th. Now, we all know if anyone's capable of pulling off a shock, it is Chris Wilder and Sheffield United. You know, with how good they were in the promotion season, they played some absolutely brilliant football. It's a unique system that's coming up to the Premier League as well, which could actually be quite tricky to play against with those sort of overlapping centre-backs, the two wing-backs who fit into the system very well. I like some of the additions they made into that squad. They've added a bit more creativity with players like Luke Freeman, Callum Robinson, who's come from my club Preston, who I'm expecting big things from. I've seen quite a bit of Sheffield United in pre-season, and he scored some cracking goals so far. There's also quite a few other unknowns going into that squad. They've taken the risk on someone like Ravel Morrison and Muset from Bournemouth as well. Getting Dean Henderson back for the season will be big for them. I think he's one of the most upcoming promising goalkeepers in the country at this point in time. No one can really predict how players like Ollie McBurney, Billy Sharp and David McGoldrick are going to make that step up to the Premier League, but I just don't know if they'll end up having the quality. It's all about how these players step up. I'm sure that Sheffield United will be fine with being the underdogs for the season. I think they'll actually thrive on that and play to their advantage. I've got them in bottom. They could well surprise a lot of us. In 19th, I've gone for a bit of a bold shout. I've gone for Crystal Palace. Now, since being promoted back to the Premier League, Crystal Palace have been the model of consistency. I don't believe they finished lower than 15th actually. But this season's shaping up to be a little bit of a disaster for them at the moment. With how pre-season's gone, they just got battered 4-0 by Hertha Berlin. Some other games saw them get beat by Nottingham Forest, the draw against AFC Wimbledon. I really look at that squad at the moment, and I think there's a serious lack of depth in some positions. At fullback, they seem to be like midfield doesn't look great at the moment, and going forward especially looks to be a real issue for them. Obviously, the situation around Wilfried Zaha's continuing to unfold. Everton still seem to be quite keen on the player. Where his mindset's at for the new season, I'm not so sure. Their record without Wilfried Zaha, though, has been pretty tragic over the past 2 seasons. And if he's not quite firing on all cylinders, or he does eventually end up leaving either in this transfer window or in January, Crystal Palace are really left short going forward. They have brought in Jordan Ayew, who was there last season, who scored 1 goal for them. They've also brought in Gary Cahill, which I don't really see as much of an inspired signing. I could be absolutely miles off with this one, but I thought I'd be bold for it, and I've got them going down. In 18th, I've gone for another fairly bold shout. I've thrown Burnley in there. Now, Burnley aren't coming off the greatest of seasons last time around, especially how they started last season. They were 19th in the table in December. They only picked up a handful of wins up until the new year. They were conceding more than 2.1 goals per game. The thing that turned around Burnley's season last time was seemingly the reintroduction of Tom Heaton into the first team. Now with him gone, I'm not sure how I think Burnley will get on this season. I don't necessarily think that Sean Dyche has been 100% backed compared to some of the other clubs around that region of the table. Centre mid was an area where I thought Burnley would look into this summer, but they've not really addressed that area. Gio Rodriguez could chip in with a few more goals, but apart from that, their starting 11 doesn't really seem to be much stronger than last season. With Burnley, I could be way off. I've got them in that last relegation spot. In 17th and just avoiding relegation, I have got Newcastle in there. I've seen a couple of people backing them for relegation this time. They've lost quite a bit of goals going forward with the departure of Jose Perez and then no longer having Solomon Rondon. They have looked to replace that in this transfer window though, with St. Maxim and Joelinton coming in. Bruce is working with not an awful group of players. Newcastle had the best defensive record in the bottom half of the Premier League last year. That defence is still intact, and I still think they'll be able to make themselves fairly hard to beat. There is a bit of pressure for the 2 new signings to hit the floor running, but surely even Steve Bruce can't mess it up so badly that Newcastle go on to get relegated after finishing 13th the season before. In 16th, I've gone for Norwich City. They have had a fairly quiet transfer window. They've not spent a lot of money at all, but I was so impressed with the performances from last season. They only really needed to add a piece here or there. Last season in the Championship, they scored 93 goals. To put that into a bit of context, that's 11 more than what Wolves scored when they were promoted the season prior. Going forward, I think they've got some brilliant options who I think are more than good enough to make that step up to the Premier League. Emi Buendia is someone who I think is really going to rip it up this year for them. There is a bit of reliance on Timu Pukki making a step up to the Premier League. He came up with a lot of clutch moments for them last season, and there is the possibility, especially going up against some of the top 6 this season, that Norwich could be absolutely ripped apart with the way they like to play. The weak link with Norwich at the moment is the amount of goals they concede. They let in 57 in the Championship last season. season, and that's something that maybe will need to be looked into a little bit. In 15th, I've gone for another bit of a bold shout. I could be horrifically wrong with this one. On pretty much every prediction video I've watched so far, everyone has Brighton to be relegated, but under a new manager in Graham Potter, who I thought did a fantastic job at Swansea last season, I'm going to give them a bit of optimism, and I'm going to predict them to finish in 15th. I've liked some of the deals they've done so far. Adam Webster I thought was absolutely immense for Bristol City last season. I think that if they're able to keep hold of Lewis Dunk, Webster and Dunk's a fantastic partnership. But the thing that Brighton struggled most with last season was scoring goals. They only scored 35. They've looked to address that in this transfer window though with the signature of Neil Maupay, one of my favourite players from the Championship last season. He's just a horrible player to play against, sort of like the Championship's equivalent of Diego Costa from last season. But a clinical finisher if the chances are provided to him. I think it will be a different brand of football this season under Graham Potter, looking to play out from the back. If things click for them, I think they could be the surprise package of the year this season in the Premier League. I'm going to say 15th. I could be way off on that. In at 14th, I've gone for Aston Villa, who spent an absolute fortune in this transfer window so far. If I had £1 for every time I've heard someone say that Aston Villa are going to do a Fulham, then I'd probably be able to afford their transfer budget. But in all seriousness, Villa were left in a bit of an awkward position when they were promoted because they had quite a reliance on loan players from last season. They made up the core of that squad. They spent quite a bit of money on getting players back into the squad who were there last season, like Courtney House, Tyrone Mings and El Ghazi. They had to look for a replacement for Tammy Abraham. They've done that with Wesley, and they've also added in players who have previously worked under this manager, people like Jota from Birmingham, who have since had a fantastic pre-season. I think it's just because I follow a lot of Villa fans on Twitter, but I've seen pretty much every goal they've scored this pre-season, and they've been playing some really attractive stuff. The midfield's also looking stronger, and I believe they're still on the lookout for another winger, but the one sign that I think could be one of the most underrated in the Premier League this season is the signature of Tom Heaton. Dean Smith's got a clear philosophy for how he wants this Villa side to play, and I don't think they'll stray too far away from that throughout the season. I think they'll continue to score plenty of goals, and Villa fans will just enjoy the ride. Bournemouth I've got finishing one place better than they did last season. I've liked some of the business they've done in this transfer window so far, targeting quite a few young players, people like Lloyd Kelly and Jack Stacey. Harry Wilson comes on loan for this season, coming off the back of a fantastic year with Derby in the Championship, and they just have some brilliant options going forward. The likes of David Brooks, Callum Wilson, Josh King, Ryan Fraser, on top of all the new players they've added. Defensively, I'm still a little bit wary about them, but I think they'll have enough going forward, and I think they'll be set up for an entertaining season. Southampton could fly under the radar a little bit. Preston played them in pre-season. I thought they were excellent. They played some brilliant football. They've addressed some of the goals they were lacking last season with the additions of Danny Ings and Chelms, two quite dynamic strikers. Chelms especially, I'm looking forward to seeing how he gets on with the move to the Premier League. Last season, it was probably the best decision they made to part ways with Mark Hughes, and since a new manager's arrived, I thought that we saw an uptrend in performances. I think that will continue into this season, and I think they could surprise a few. In 11th, I've got Watford finishing in exactly the same position they finished last season. They've had a fairly quiet transfer window compared to some of the other clubs who I'm predicting to finish above them. Started last season out really well. They won their first 4 matches, however, seemed to just fall away a little bit towards the end of the season. There seems to be a little bit more structure at the club now with a manager like Javi Garcia. You know, over the past few seasons, you never really know what's going to happen at Watford in terms of the manager turnover. But I think their squad's looking good enough that they won't be within the threat of relegation. I'm just not sure if it can break into the top 10 with some of the sides I'm predicting to finish above them. In 10th, I've gone for West Ham United. Their major incoming this season has been Haller, coming over from the Bundesliga. He scored 15 goals and picked up 9 assists there last season. Someone who, you know, largely how he gets on is going to be how well West Ham go on to do this season. They've got a good manager in Pellegrini, but something dramatic always seems to happen along the way in a West Ham season. Things never quite seem to go to plan. In 9th, I've then got Wolves. Now, Wolves are a weird one because you never really know how European football is going to affect them, and I think that with the way that Wolves like to play, they'll actually go quite deep into that competition. I can't see Nuno taking that lightly, and with some of the players they've now added to the squad, the Europa League, they could have a really good crack at it this year, and that could have a bit of an effect on how they get on in the Premier League. I do like some of the additions they've made, the likes of Dendoncker coming back, Vallejo in defence, Catroni from AC Milan's a bit of a gamble which could pay off. I get the impression there is still a bit of a feeling around Wolves fans that they could have done a little bit more in this transfer window, but I still think they'll be set up for a decent season, especially in Europe, and could easily, you know, finish much higher than that in the league. In 8th, I've gone for Everton. This part of the table is interesting because with the top 6, there's a little bit of uncertainty there at the moment, and I especially think for sides like Wolves, Everton and Leicester, there's the potential that one of them could break into that with, you know, Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea all looking a bit uncertain. I think Everton have done some really good business in this window though. Interested to see how Keane gets on. They've been lacking the striker ever since losing Lukaku really. Hopefully that'll mean we now see the best of Richarlison as well. He won't really be needed to play down the middle. They've got Andre Gomez back, who impressed there last season, although the loss of Idrissa Gueye may hinder them. In 7th, I've then got Leicester City. Brendan Rodgers with his first full season in charge of the club. I've just got a good feeling about them and been impressed by some of the business they've done so far. Signing Tielemans, massive expensive deal. Jose Perez from Newcastle as well, who impressed there last season in quite a defensive system. The loss of Maguire is going to hurt them, but it looks as if they're still in the market for another centre-back. I really like what Rodgers is doing with this squad. I think there's a lot of optimism. Going forward, I think they'll cause a lot of teams problems, and for whatever the meme that Rodgers has become over recent years, I do think he is actually quite an underrated manager. In 6th place, I've gone for Chelsea with the transfer ban this season. I actually think that this season could work in their favour in the long run. It's going to mean that Lampard has a little bit less pressure on him. Expectations are lowered after losing Hazard and not being able to replace him, and we're going to get to see a few more of their youngsters this season, players who were really stood out in the Championship last season, like Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount and Reece James. There have been some decent performances throughout pre-season, and they've still got a decent core of players in there. I'm still not sure who's going to be their main number 9 this season, whether it's going to be Tammy Abraham, Giroud or even Batshuayi. I can see them becoming a little bit unstuck at times, but because it's Lampard there, I think he will be given time. In 5th and just missing out on the Champions League, I'm going to throw United in there, although I do like the additions of Wan-Bissaka and Maguire to sturdy up them at the back. Midfield still looks like a massive weakness to me, and I'm not sure about some of the egos that are still in that dressing room. If Pogba and De Gea turn up for this season, then them themselves are good enough to just about get United into the top 4, but with how everything's going, they've still got a fairly inexperienced manager in Ole. I think I still just about fancy Arsenal to finish above them. And finishing in 4th place, I have got Arsenal. Now, Arsenal's defence is absolutely tragic, and surely they're going to have to address it for the remainder of this transfer window, but going forward, I think there's guaranteed goals in that squad. I still believe Unai Emery is the right man for the job there, and they will continue to build on the season that was had there last season. They're still being linked with quite a few big names, and with that forward 3 that they've got going into this season, I think they'll just about squeeze in. 3rd place, pretty obvious. I'm going to go for Spurs. I think most people would have them finishing in this position at the moment. I think that there is quite a distinction between the top 3 and the rest of the clubs. I think that Spurs are comfortably, I think they've comfortably got the 3rd best squad in the league at the moment. They've actually invested into the squad so far this season, and it looks as if they're going to continue to do that going into deadline day, still being linked with quite a few big money moves. If Kane manages to stay fit for the full season, I see no reason why Spurs shouldn't be finishing in the top 4. And for the top 2, probably a little bit obvious. 2nd place, it's still going to be Liverpool, and winning the league is going to be Manchester City. Liverpool ran them so close last season, but they've not really, they've not addressed anything into their squad this season. It's been a fairly quiet transfer window for them. To bridge that gap to City, with City going on to improve their squad, Liverpool would have to have another exceptional season, and I don't know if they have that in their tank again. I don't think that the levels will be quite as high as they were last season, and the point tally between Liverpool and City will be so high, but I think they'll still run them fairly close. But Man City have got even better than last season with the new additions they made into the squad. Hopefully for them, Kevin De Bruyne will be able to stay fit for an entire season. He's going to want to prove himself to be still one of the best, if not the best players in the league, and until Guardiola leaves the league, I can't see any different. But as you can see on screen now, guys, there are my Premier League predictions for the upcoming season. No doubt they are going to be absolutely awful. Tear me apart in the comments down below, and I'm going to get a bunch of them wrong. But just remember, it is my opinion, and I want it to be a little bit different with a couple of them and switch it up from what I've seen so far. So let me know down below who you fancying for the bottom 3 and the top 6 this season. Also, make sure you do go ahead and join the Fantasy Football League. I want to get as many in there as possible. But if you did go in to enjoy, make sure you leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. Make sure you stay tuned for some regular football content. But apart from that, thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.